Greetings, good evening, good morning, good wherever you are, whatever time it is. Mr. Bruce again, and I'm taking a look at the odd election of 1824 in this short recording. This one I'm going to try and keep under 10 minutes, and so let's see how it goes. Who knows? So, the subtitle here, also known as what happens in a two-party system when there's only one party, I need to explain that. The best way for me to do that is to take a look at what was going on in the 18 teens. And so when you look at this image here, I'm a big fan of National Geographic, and I like, wild Sahara videos and just to see what animals do. But as I looked at this situation, I felt that the Republicans here and the Federalists are really well typified in this image. By the 1820s, there really aren't that many Federalists around anymore, and those that call themselves Federalists don't get a lot of airtime. Through the 1820s, really, there's only one last group of Federalists, and they're in the Supreme Court, and they're going to come into a big role, play a big role in just a few years. We'll get to that. So when you killed off your competition, oftentimes when what we see here is when the Federalists are gone, the Republicans turn on themselves, and which actually ends up looking more like, well, it looks more like this, right? So especially with the rise of the political party we're going to learn about with Andrew Jackson. Now, I love this image, but let's take a look at more of what's going on here. So, in 1804, these presidential elections, they give us a sense of what's going on and who is being supported, which party, which leadership is being supported. And as I flip through the election of 1804, you can see that the green Democratic Republicans kind of grows and shrinks, but generally over time, what happens is that the Federalist Party goes away. The Republican Party, we see a significant decline all the way to the point that in 1820, James Monroe basically runs unopposed. There are no candidates from the opposite party to give a substantial run at it. And so you see John Quincy Adams in this election gets one electoral vote. Adams wasn't even running. Adams was Monroe's Secretary of State and was perfectly fine there. Now, the nature of the position, Secretary of State, is worth noting here also. Every president from Jefferson to Madison to Monroe, they've all been the Secretary of State at one point, particularly for the president that they would follow. But by 1820, the Federalist Party is basically non-existent in the elections anyways. So when James Monroe serves his second term, he does not seek a third term. That's the precedent that George Washington set. And so we have four candidates, all from the same party, right? We have John Quincy Adams from Massachusetts. He was Secretary of State in 1824. Henry Clay of Kentucky was a congressman. He was actually the Speaker of the House of Representatives in 1824. William Crawford was from Georgia. He represented the old Republicans, the radical Republicans, those old states' rights guys deep in the South. And he was from Georgia. He was serving as Secretary of the Treasury under Monroe. And then Andrew Jackson, who was just elected as senator, a Republican senator. And so prior to that, he had been a general in the Army. And we will learn more about Andrew Jackson very shortly. Regarding his political career, especially as general. Now, in 1824, here's how the election shakes out. Right, this map shows really the sectional support for the candidates, and we can see how it's very, very spread out. There's not really a whole lot of anyone that gets a lot of support. You see Jackson, though. Jackson seems to carry a majority of, well, not a majority. Majority would be more than half, and well, no one gets more than half. So who won? Right, Jackson gets 99 electoral votes. He also gets a lot of popular votes, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit too. The electoral votes are what matters, and if the total electoral votes amongst the entire college is 261, that means you need 130 or 132 or 131 actually for a majority. No one gets that. So what happens? Now I'm gonna leave this slide here for a little while. I want you to pause this slide for the purpose of studying it, and I want you to find 3 things that are odd or questionable or you don't understand. Okay? So go ahead, pause it and look for 3 things that you find are weird. Pause it. I mean it. Pause it. All right, now that you're back, one of the things I want you to look for is this, right? John Quincy Adams received fewer electoral votes but won the election in the House of Representatives with 13 state delegations voting for John Quincy Adams, 7 for Jackson, 3 for Crawford. Let's look at that more carefully, but here, take a look, right? Hopefully you saw that the winner received 84 electoral votes, whose main opponent received 99. That doesn't make sense, right? Doesn't make sense. So let's take a look at how that happened, right? The 12th Amendment was created after the election of 1800, and the 12th Amendment basically said this, that we're going to take the 2 votes that each elector gets in the Electoral College and say he has to take one of those votes and put it for president and one of those votes for vice president, right? That way these two guys don't end up getting the same amount of votes, or these 2 guys should get the same amount of votes, but they're not going for the same office. What this does is it solidifies the role of political parties in a 2-party system in this presidential election. Okay, but like I said at the very beginning of the video, right? What happens in a 2-party system when there's only one political party? You get chaos, and that's what this is, right? So if there's a tie or if no one gets a majority in the Electoral College, the House of Representatives decides, and they do so in the form of a one state, one vote. All the delegates from all the congressmen in a state, they cast their ballot and they get 1 vote. And so it doesn't matter which the biggest state is, right? So New York is the biggest state, they still only get 1 vote. Now, so you can see here in this election, in the House of Representatives, we see John Quincy Adams gets 13. You can do some quick math here and recognize that the next guy, Andrew Jackson, only gets 7. But didn't Jackson receive the most electoral votes in the general election? Didn't Jackson have more people vote for him overall? Yeah, so when we look at this election, this is really fishy, and Andrew Jackson would be the first one to say the same thing, right? What ends up happening is the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Henry Clay, one of the guys who was running in this election, said, "I can't believe that killing 2,500 Englishmen at New Orleans qualifies for the various difficult and complicated duties of the chief magistracy." It's a fancy word. He was speaking about Jackson, and he didn't like Jackson particularly because he didn't see Jackson as being one of those that supported the views that Henry Clay had regarding the growth of the United States and its economy and its trade and so on. And so Henry Clay said the best guy for the job is John Quincy Adams, and he was right? John Quincy Adams was the most qualified of all the candidates. But the popularity of Jackson is what bothers Clay the most. And so in the end, we see these 2 guys not very much liking each other. Okay, so John Quincy Adams, when he becomes president, he names Henry Clay his Secretary of State. And Clay's like, yeah, that sounds like an awesome job. Remember, Secretary of State was one of those positions that was kind of like the next step to being president. John Quincy Adams was Secretary of State for Monroe. Monroe was Secretary of State for Madison. Madison was Secretary of State for Jefferson. And so Jackson's like, this is ridiculous, right? He just named his successor. He just named his guy who was going to be the next president, right? And that's called a corrupt bargain. And Jackson's pretty upset for a while. He will seek vengeance in the next election. And I wanted to point out a few things here. This is where Jackson goes with this. Jackson and his supporters take a look at what really happened in this election, and this table is really big and broad, and you can pause this and study this as much or as little as you'd like. But what I want you to focus in on is look at all the states who don't have a popular vote, particularly the biggest state. Right? They don't have a popular vote because the legislatures in those states are the ones that choose electors. Those electors don't represent the people's vote at all. And so what we see here is that when the map I showed earlier said that Jackson had 150,000 some popular votes, you see that down here actually in the bottom left-hand corner of this. That's very inaccurate. That doesn't really tell us much. The people don't have the say in who their president is the way they do today. Now, in addition, we see a lot of states that say, that there's going to be a popular vote, but that popular vote doesn't really determine who the electors are. Also, in 1824, there isn't a lot of people that vote. Right, 365,000, well, almost 366,000 people voted. That's the total number of ballots cast by the general public. And that is a very tiny fraction of white males who owned land, who paid taxes on land. And over the next 4 years, we're going to see a significant increase in the electorate, which means that there's going to be a significant group of people who are added to those who are able to vote. Particularly the land requirement gets stripped away. And so in the next election, just 4 years later, we're going to see 1.4 million people vote. Guess who they're going to vote for? Yeah, they're going to vote for Jackson. Jackson was, again, popular. Everyone saw in the newspapers, everyone read that, gosh, Jackson got cheated out of the office by the House of Representatives. What scoundrels. Now, the other thing we're going to see in the next election is a more emphasis on states giving their people through their popular vote a chance to say who the electors are, and who then those electors can vote for in the presidency in their presidential election. So huge changes. Now, in the end, what we see is there are two major ideas results here. Number one, that Jackson's popularity increases, and he seeks revenge. But bigger than that are Adams continues as president these internal improvements. Right, he is not known as a bad president. He gets a really bad rap. He doesn't win the next election, but gosh, he really should have, because he's a very able and capable leader. And so we see Adams doing the thing that the House of Representatives pushed for in the teens and 20s with internal improvements. But as Jackson's popularity increases, we see the rise of a new political party, the Jacksonian Democrats, who challenge the Republicans. The Republicans kind of die out and form the Whig Party. We'll talk about that later too. But in the election of 1828, we see Jackson winning big. He'll win again in the election of 1832. And we'll see then a further split between the Jacksonian Democrats and the Whigs. So hopefully that was great. Kept this to 14 minutes. Please make sure that you complete whatever you need to complete for this. And as we move forward, these are going to be a great opportunity for us to learn.